Welcome to the Therapeutic Food Solutions podcast. I'm your host, Mary Mitchell. I'm an integrative nutrition health coach, therapeutic diet expert, and founder of The Road to Living Whole. There are many different diets out there. It's hard to know which one is right for you with your chronic illness and autoimmune disease. In this podcast, I'm going to share with you the foundational pieces every single therapeutic diet out there shares, and also how to use the best one for your particular diagnosis. If you've been looking for a meal planning partner, help navigating the complicated healthcare system, and want to feel better quickly, I'm your girl. Grab your kombucha and notebook. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I have a fantastic guest today, and I'm thrilled for the conversation we're going to have and all the information you and I are going to learn together. I have a biochemical engineer, Samuel Shepard, and his story is incredibly fascinating, and I absolutely love his passion for helping get to the root cause of chronic disease and disease in general, and the solutions that he's aware of that can really help combat that and help us give our body what it needs to heal. Samuel, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Marion, for having me, and at least the opportunity to get a lot of this information out, because people are lost in hope. You know, when some of these diagnoses come in, the current medical environment isn't providing any other guidance, and it's real easy to lose hope.
Yes.
And this is going to be a very basic discussion on why we get disease and how we can prevent ourselves from getting those diseases. And if you have those diseases, this is a way of mitigating it. And it's backed up by tremendous research through the National Institute of Health, but it's not been available to the public unless you're a researcher.
Yeah. I feel like we have so much knowledge out there that never translates to daily care. Like, doctors don't know it's available. They don't know the clinical application. You know, if somebody who's just in the chronic illness world struggling with it and is looking for solutions and stumbles upon a study, it's, how do I find this product? How do I know that it's a good one? There's so much out there, along with doctors being like, well, I don't know how to help you. These pills might help for a while, and we'll just give them a try.
Right. And a lot of the research is so in depth. Unless you are a biochemist, you're not going to understand half of the lingo that they're using and understand the implications of some of the conclusions in those research papers. So for the last almost 30 years now, I've been going through this and trying to get it. I teach biochemistry, so I have to teach it to people who know little or nothing about some of these pathways and why we get diseases. So I had a unique gift, I guess, in being able to translate a lot of these complex issues into very simple terms that people can translate into their everyday living. So probably the best way to start is, I was a researcher my entire life. I hold 44 international and domestic patents in a number of fields, from bioweapons to plasma beam weapons to medical devices to stop Alzheimer's. So I may have gotten a little too close to something early on in my career, but in 2003, I got diagnosed with incurable bone cancer. And the cancer was called polycythemia vera. Thought I had heart disease. It turned out I didn't. It turned out that I had a cancer of the stem cells in the bone marrow that was producing, typically you produce 3 to 5 million red blood cells every day. I was doing 30 to 60 million every day.
Oh.
And my blood was like ketchup. My blood pressure would shoot to 280 over 160. I knew I was going to stroke. I was going to throw a blood clot. Something was really bad was going to happen. So at that time, there was no treatment, no chemo, no radiation options available. The only option that I had was to be phlebotomized. I had to be bled every month. And I would go in and they would pull my blood out. It's the old analogy. The solution to pollution is dilution.
Mm-hmm.
So they would take out the red blood cells and allow me to build back. And I did that for 4 years, every month for 4 years. And I knew I was losing the battle. My blood was getting thicker, quicker. My heart had enlarged from the blood pressure issues. And I knew this was not going to be a good outcome. And I was probably going to stroke. And then my family was going to have to take care of me. So all of these things go through your mind at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And this one morning I got up and I sort of just quit. I knew I was at the end of my rope. I'm the only guy that I know of that's actually pegged a blood pressure cuff. They switched 4 blood pressure cuffs because they thought the blood pressure cuff had malfunctioned, but it was my actual blood pressure. So I'm sitting at the table very early in the morning with a cup of coffee, and I got very close to God at that time because I knew this was probably going to be it. And I just gave up. I said, I thought I was in control of my life. I was until then. I had a great career. I was financially independent. I had 2 airplanes. I could go anywhere in the world I wanted to go. And it was meaningless. If you don't have your health, your life is truly in a downward spiral. I sat there and it just came to me, there's got to be some leaves, some animals, something on this planet that doesn't get cancer. And I had access to what would be now considered the AI database, but it was a database called ProQuest, and it was a government database. Everything known in the universe was on that database. So I queried that database and asked of all the animals that had no history of ever having gotten cancer. The query came back at 5 animals: salmon, pink flamingos, sharks, elephants, and naked mole rats. So I was on a team in San Diego, and I asked a researcher there for Scripps Oceanographic if they could test those 5 different species tissue samples. And I wanted a screening algorithm in it that would screen out common things that you would find in the animals: carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, enzymes, vitamins, amino acids. And I said, I'm looking for a molecule that shouldn't be in any of these animals, and yet is found in all 5 of these species. It took them about 4 months, and they come back and they said they found one. And I was a little surprised, to be quite honest. It turned out to be Asta-zan-than. And Asta-zan-than is it's the most powerful antioxidant known to exist in nature. It's produced by an algae species called Haematococcus pluvialis. So I went to the University of Texas, and I went to Walmart and bought one of those, I call them hillbilly hot tubs, but the Intex hot tub that has the blower, and I put a plastic cover over it and I bungee cord it so I could blow it up with the bubbler, and I could feed it carbon dioxide. I used dry ice at that time, and I began growing this algae in my backyard. I learned how to make it produce very high concentrations, about 3 to 3.5%, 3.8% astaxanthin. So the way I did it, when I grew it, it was green algae. And the way this algae produces the astaxanthin is its pond begins to dry up. And as the water evaporates off the pond, the salt content increases. So as the salt content increases, the algae perceives that its pond is about to dry out. So it produces this antioxidant to block the sun's ultraviolet rays so that it can maintain its life profile in the soil, waiting for the next rainfall in 100 years so it could survive and come back. So I just added salt to my reactors, and within 24 to 48 hours, it went from a green algae to a bright red algae. And then I floated the algae out, skimmed it off, put it in a dehydrator, And I knew it was about 3.8% astaxanthin. So I started out at about 4 milligrams per day was my dose, because it's a red algae, and everything you study about red is that it's probably toxic. There's a fundamental problem with red tide and all of that. But I really didn't want to kill my kidneys or my liver. So I started out at a fairly low dose of 4 milligrams. I did that for about almost 5 months. And what I noticed was my phlebotomies, instead of being once a month, were now once about every 2 months. So the slope of the climb out was decreasing. And I was perfectly healthy. I no liver enzyme activity, no kidney failure, nothing like that. So I got a little gutsy and I said, okay, let's triple the dose. So I went to 12 milligrams per day. And in about 2 months, I noticed a dramatic change. My phlebotomies got pushed out to once every 4 months.
Wow.
That was statistically significant.
Mm-hmm.
So now I had 3 slopes of the curve. I had the control, which was once a month. I had the 4 milligrams once every 2 months. And then I had the 12 milligrams once every 4 months. So I had 3 slopes of the curve. So I was able to calculate there's a standard mathematical equation you can use, but it's almost like a square root function. So I could calculate how much do I have to take so that I'm never phlebotomized for the next 50 years of my life. And it turned out to be 96 milligrams a day.
Okay.
From 12 to 96. So I started taking 100 milligrams per day, and my phlebotomies ended. I'm the only known cure of polycythemia vera on the planet.
That's amazing.
It was shocking to me. My blood pressure normalized, my A1C normalized, all of my blood work became perfect. And it took me from 2000, that happened in about 2007, I guess, 2008. And for the next 5 years, I was trying to figure out why in the world did it work from a biochemical point of view.
Yeah.
And I'm not one of those guys that, go take a supplement. I don't know how it works, but it worked. Well, that's not me. I had to know biochemically what was the pathway at which this worked.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me about 5 to 8 years to finally figure out why this was working. In 2013, there was a young lady, stage 4 inflammatory breast cancer. I'd known her a couple years before. And we were at a party in Mississippi, and she came to the party. It was going to be her last party. She was given 2 to 4 months to live. And she was now home with hospice. Mm-hmm. She came to the party, and at that time, I didn't want anybody. I told the gentleman whose party we went to, he's a friend of mine, this is what I'm working on, but you can't tell anybody what I'm working on. Well, don't trust your friends, first of all. So he ended up telling her, because she was in such a bad condition. Mm-hmm. And she came in and she said, I understand you're working on an anti-cancer medication. I said, yeah, but you're not supposed to know about it. She smiled and she said, I want to be your guinea pig. I said, no. I said, I can't do guinea pigs. And she said that she was in her second month of a 4-month prognosis, and she had about another 2 months to live. She reached up and she grabbed my cheeks, and she says, I need to do this. And I said, I don't know the dose to give you. I said, we haven't worked out dosing. I don't know what to give you. She said, well, how much can you spare? And I said, well, we're producing about 3,000 milligrams a day. And she says, I'll do that. And I thought, oh my golly, I don't know what it's going to do to her. And it didn't matter at that point. So I said, I'll tell you what, we'll do it for 60 days. And I said, you can't say anything to anybody. We gave her 3,000 milligrams a day. And she had 2 tumors in her brain, 7 tumors in her colon, and a large lesion on her left breast.
Mm-hmm.
In 44 days, the lesion had healed over. She was now gaining weight. And hospice called MD Anderson and told them that she was not, quote, progressing. And so MD Anderson brought her back to Houston, and they said they were going to look at pain management for her in the last month or so of her life. She said, I'm not in any pain. So he put her up and palpated into her colon area, and he couldn't feel the tumors. He said, I don't know what's going on here. And he saw where the lesion had healed over her left breast. And he set her up for a PET scan. And the PET scan came back that she was cancer-free. And on her way home, she drove from Houston back to Mississippi, called me on the phone, and she said she was just beside herself. And she said, you need to tell the people about this. I said, no, I said, I don't. I said, just thank God every day that you were given this miracle. And she said, no, she said, they think they did something. And I said, that's fine. I said, I don't need the credit for it. I'm just not in a position right now to go public with this. She said, well, they took a lot of blood samples and they're trying to figure out why my cancer, they'd never seen anything like this. They called it a miraculous remission. And I knew if they took that much blood work that they were going to be able to probably find this carotenoid in her bloodstream. So I didn't tell her that, but sure enough, about 4 or 5 days later, it might have been a week later, she called me on the phone again. She says, I just got off the phone with the pathologist at MD Anderson, and they found this molecule in my bloodstream that wasn't in any of the other blood samples. And he asked me to explain, what did I change in my diet? Where did this come from? And I said, you didn't tell him, did you? And she said, no. She said, I can't tell you. I need to call somebody first. And I thought,
that's no. A good setup.
yeah. Now the gig's up. I said, oh, so he's expecting you to call him back. She said, you have to call this guy and tell him, what we're doing. And I said, no. I said, I'm not going to do that right now. And she said, he really wants to know. They've never seen anything like this again. And I said, I tell you what, you give him my telephone number, and if he was interested, he can call me. Well, it was that next day, I think, or the day after, I get a phone call from him. And he introduces himself, and he says, we have a common patient. I said, no, I don't have patients. And he said, oh. He said, so you're not a medical doctor? I said, no, I'm not a prescribing doctor. I'm a research doctor. He said, oh, so you're prescribing medications without a license? I said, no, I'm not prescribing anything. I said, this is a natural supplement. Oh, well, he said, it looks like it had an impact on this lady's cancer, and we only look at that as medicinal. I said, you can look at it however you want, but I knew where the conversation was going. I said, I tell you what, I said, I need your name, your address, and your bank account number. And he said, what do you need that for? I said, because I'm a research scientist. I fall under the First Amendment. And I said, if there's anything that comes of this, I'm going to sue you. And I'm going to take everything you have ever made and will ever make for the rest of your life. And he hung up on me. So then I began to think, okay, the heat's on, something's going to happen. So nothing really happened. I continued to research at the Naval Yard under security in Charleston, South Carolina. Nothing really happened. Well, in April of 2019, I received a request to go up and speak to a bunch of senators, representatives. Ben Carson's staff was there. The five majors, John Hopkins, Sloan, MD Anderson, Mayo, the Cleveland Clinic were all present. Went on for 2 hours. Truly was like a PhD dissertation, but I had figured out the four free radicals. I had found those that cause 92% of all inflammatory disease. That includes cancer, heart disease, irritable bowel, Hashimoto's, type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS, are all caused by those four free radicals. So I went through the chemistry as to how that chemistry worked. That was in April of 2019. In July of 2019, I get a complaint filed against me for a lawsuit filed by the state of Oregon. And I wrote a 13-page rebuttal back. At that point, because I fall under the First Amendment, no government agency can interfere with my right to do research. And when I explained to and I put that in the letter, Senate, they read the letter, the director of Health and Human Services for the state of Oregon called me. And she says, this was one of the quickest responses we'd ever received from an official complaint. But here at the bottom, you say that you need my personal information for a lawsuit. I said, yes. I said, you as a government employee are violating my First Amendment rights. She said, no, I'm indemnified by the state of Oregon. I said, ma'am, you better reread the First Amendment. There is no indemnification allowed. You are personally liable. And there's silence on the phone. And she said, Mr. Shepard, I don't think anything's going to come of this. And I said, well, you let me know. And we said our goodbyes, never heard back from them other than 7 days later, I get a letter stating that the official complaint was not accepted by the state of Oregon. They had filed an investigation on the doctor who filed the complaint, and they would be investigating him. So that worked out all right. Well, didn't have any problems really after that until the latter part of November of 2019. And I was hanging Christmas lights in my front yard, and my fence, 4 inches, I was on the house side of the fence, my fence exploded. And the bullet had come through chest high, went through my fence, and it was only because I reached, because my lights went out to the plug. At the same instant, he pulled the trigger. And the bullet came through the fence, exploded the fence, and the bullet went underneath my armpit. And I jumped behind a truck, and I yelled up, stop shooting, and there was no answer. And I wanted to look out, thinking maybe it was a deer hunter or somebody shot something. So ran in the house, and I called the sheriff. The sheriff came out, filed a police report. He put a wire in the hole and pointed up into the woods, which is just across the street from me. And there he found a pile of leaves. It looked like somebody had been laying in those leaves for at least 2 hours. And he came back in the house and he asked me what I did for a living, and I told him. And he said, we need to have a conversation. I said, this wasn't a deer hunter? He said, no, Mr. Shepard, this was a .223 round, and deer hunters don't shoot towards houses, and they're usually elevated. He said this was a horizontal, from the trajectory, it was a horizontal shot. So I explained to him, and there was a police report. It's in Lexington County, South Carolina. And he said he was going to turn it over to the FBI. Well, about 2 days later, the FBI called me, said that they had 17 other cases similar to this. Unfortunately, I'm the only survivor. The other 17 were dead from suicide. And he asked me some questions, and I said, do you think this was an accident? And his comment was, no, this was no accident. He said, he said, don't take this personal. He said, they're trying to stop the information from getting out. I said, well, how do you stop this? He said, you have to go public with everything you know. So all through December of 2019, I did, 20 to 30 videos and described biochemically by disease how this worked. And it ended. I haven't had any sort of action against me since then. So we are truly on to why we get disease. And now it's out in the public. Taking me out can't stop this now. We're in 27 countries with the product. The product's called Valasta, but we're in 27 countries in all 50 states now. So taking me out is not going to stop this. Pandora's out of the box.
Not to interrupt, first of all, wow, I'm so glad that they were unsuccessful.
Oh, I am too.
I follow another researcher, a health researcher, Max Legurve. I forget how to say his last name. But his mom died from dementia, and he has been highlighting Astaxanthin repeatedly for the last few years. And I can only think that it's because of you taking this information public. And I mean, it took, what, 10 years, 11 years?
Yeah.
And you were so cautious. And as somebody who, what I do is I help people to get the foundation of diet and lifestyle and really master that. But that's just the foundation, right? And when somebody's in a disease state, there needs to be extra. But what happens is there's a little bit of shiny object syndrome, squirrel syndrome, where people get really easily distracted, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also there's a lot of snake oil out there. There's a lot of promises made where, as you said, the why it works is in development. It's in research. So it comes out because it helped one person maybe, but then there's all this snake oil made. So I just want to say I'm so grateful that you're still here. And
So much.
yeah, it's kind of funny because in the health world, you kind of become a little bit of a conspiracy theorist because there's too many coincidences of progress in something as lucrative as the cancer industry and other things where innovations are made and discoveries are made, and then it just disappears, right? And unfortunately, it's true, as you know firsthand now.
Yeah, it's not a conspiracy. I
Yeah.
can I've sort of lived it for the last 20 years or so. But this finding this was sort of narcissistic. I was blessed financially. It took me about 1.8 million to figure out why this worked. Fortunately, I could do that and not have to get borrow money or have grants or anything like that. I could do it autonomously.
Mm-hmm.
And the thoughts went through my mind is that I could keep that money and give it to my children, or I could spend that money and try to save my own life. So there was a little bit of narcissism involved in it. But in finding that solution, the number of thousands of people that are now positively affected by that finding overshadows anything that I could ever imagine.
Yeah.
The real push is, for example, in Alzheimer's, what causes Alzheimer's was found by MIT. And it's the plating out of the amyloid beta plaque onto the neurons around the myelin in the brain. And it eventually destroys the neurons, given enough time. So it goes from an initial period, a damaging period, and then a destructive period. So during the initiation phase, you may not even notice something. You might just forget where your keys are. You might, forget a name or something. And people sort of link that to just old age. Then it goes into the damage phase where the amyloid plaque is actually degrading the myelin, the insulating material on the axon of the neuron. And now you're getting short circuits. Instead of the electricity going down the axon, it's short circuiting into your brain and you're losing that signal. Then it becomes more serious. Then you get into if the cell is losing short circuiting that much as the myelin comes off from the amyloid plaque, the neuron can't generate enough energy to keep that electrical signal going, and it eventually dies. And in the brain, neurons don't regenerate like that. And that becomes full-blown Alzheimer's. You lose complete function. So what causes the amyloid plaque to misfold? It's called protein misfolding. So when the amyloid plaque is there, if you have these free radicals in your brain, the hydroxyl, the superoxide, singlet oxygen, or the peroxyl, those are the four that cause this. What they do is, as that concentration of those increase, the probability of them being involved in finding a finding that protein, they will steal an electron from it. And if they steal an electron, then the protein misfolds. It's no longer a functional protein, and the body can't handle that. So that protein misfolding eventually leads to this plaque formation. The other thing is the microglia in the brain. And microglia are very, very interesting little, I don't even say organisms, because there's no DNA in them. They're not even human. So they live in our brains from when we're born. They're immortal. They live in our brains from when we're born until we die. And they look like little octopi. They have a cell and they have all these dendritic little fingers sticking off of them. And they swing through the neuronal forest looking for debris and bacteria and viruses. They're like the waste management of our brains. And as we get older, a couple things happen. Our inflammatory stress level increases, and I'll explain why that happens. And as we get older, we lose energy. Well, if we don't have enough energy to keep the microglia active, they get lackadaisical, and they allow the amyloid plaque that they would normally eat to accumulate. That's the beginning of Alzheimer's. Now, one thing that we notice is it's very difficult for young people to get these kinds of inflammatory diseases. And the reason being is because when we're younger, we're producing cellular antioxidants called glutathione, catalase, and superoxide dismutase. And these are three antioxidants that when we process sugar in our mitochondria, we generate these hydroxyl free radicals. Well, glutathione neutralizes them as soon as they're generated. So we can do a lot of stupid things when we're young and get away with it. But at the age of 42 on average in women and age 50 in men, our glutathione levels plummet. It's nature's way of taking us out. That's called age onset disease. So what I did is I measured the glutathione on the RBC, on the red blood cells, as a function of age, from age 5 to age 105. I took blood samples. The glutathione level is very high until you start to reach about 40 years of age. And then I measured a blood test called an HSCRP. And everyone needs to run that test. You have to request it. It's called an HSCRP, high sensitivity C-reactive protein. Make sure your doctor runs it. They will tell you every reason why they don't want you to run it, but make them run it. The doctor works for you. You don't work for that doctor. So when I plotted the glutathione levels versus the HSCRP, glutathione dips down, and the stress level as measured by the HSCRP begins to climb. That is the precursor for heart disease, cancer, arthritis, irritable bowel, MS. As soon as that thing gets above, the HSCRP gets above 3 milligrams per liter in your blood, you're going to get a disease. So the objective is, how do we provide a cellular antioxidant that can get to the cells and push these free radical concentrations down, keep the HSCRP under 3 milligrams per liter. And it turns out the Valasta does that. Now, the Valasta is unique. It's not the standard Astaxanthin. It's what's called a glucosidic, and there is a patent on it. It's the only patented natural supplement. So what we do is we take the Astaxanthin and we stick a sugar, a glucose, on the end of it. And it's called a Trojan horse. And we did it for cancer reasons. Cancer loves sugar. It can't get enough of it. Cancer, to get the same amount of energy as a normal cell, will use 16 times more sugar than a normal cell will use. So we just say, okay, cancer, pull this into the cell. We'll attach a sugar to entice you. So when the cancer cell sees that sugar, it pulls it in and it drags the astaxanthin intracellular, inside the cell. In the cancer cell itself, the enzymes crack that sugar off and uses it for energy. But now the astaxanthin is inside the cell. Now, in the mitochondria, because it processes so much sugar, it generates a huge concentration of the OH zero charge. It's called a hydroxyl free radical. And what that means is that it's missing an electron in its outermost orbital. No matter what it touches, it's going to steal an electron to get one there. It makes it extremely active. Well, the hydroxyl free radical, and the cancer cell produces a lot of these, is acidic. It carries a pH. Anything under 7 is acid. Anything above 7 is alkaline. So it carries a pH of 5 to about 6.5. And it pushes these free radicals extracellular. So it pushes it outside the cell. Well, that acidic environment, the cancer can live in, but normal cells cannot. So the cells adjacent to the cancer cells are destroyed. And it makes room for the cancer now to grow into a tumor and start growing in size. And you usually lose weight. That's what causes a lot of the weight loss, along with the rapid consumption of the sugar by the cancer. So everybody has heard from the Warburg effect that cancer does not like an alkaline environment. So that OH, zero charge, looking for an electron. Electron is a minus charge. So what the astaxanthin does inside the cell is it donates an electron to the OH zero charge, converting it into an OH minus 1. Well, the pH of an OH minus 1 is 11. Kills the cancer cell in 4 seconds.
Wow.
The way we make soap, and I'm going to come back, but the way we make soap is we take lipids, we mix it with sodium hydroxide, which is an OH minus 1, and it's called saponification. And it makes the soap water soluble instead of oil or fat soluble.
Right.
And we end up with a soap. Well, the phospholipid membrane around the cancer cell is all fatty acids. It's all oil-based.
Right.
So when the OH minus 1 reacts with the fatty acids, the lipids in the membrane, it makes them water soluble. The cancer cell membrane dissolves and comes apart, and all of the guts of the cancer cell are released into the bloodstream. It's no longer a viable living cell. It's just a matter now of cleaning up what I call the dead bodies on the battlefield. You're just going to clean up the debris, but it's no longer terminal and it's no longer fatal.
That's incredible.
That's how it works.
Wow.
There's nothing in the medical industry right now because they're stuck with chemo and brute force killing of cancer cells.
Yeah. I mean, I have recently had in the last couple of years, had a few cancer patients that they started with immunotherapy first, and all of them have been successful so far.
Well, let me explain immunotherapy.
Okay, please do. Yeah.
You've probably heard about Keytruda and Opdivo. Okay. In this database, this government database, we found the thesis papers where these two girls, microbiologists, were getting their PhD thesis on using astaxanthin to eradicate melanomas.
Okay.
And they were using astaxanthin, and they were absolutely successful. I contacted one that works for Merck, another one works for Pfizer. And I said, you're now employed at this pharmaceutical company. Are you working on astaxanthin? This was in 2015. And she said, no. I said, your thesis shows that you were successful in killing this cancer. Why aren't you working on it? She said, well, that's a natural supplement. She said, my job is to mimic the activities of the astaxanthin into a new synthetic molecule that we can patent.
Right. That's how it works.
That's how it worked. But Keytruda, the immunotherapy, was developed out of MD Anderson, Dr. Allison, and the astaxanthin works the same way. So in immunotherapy, they've developed these synthetic laboratory-induced molecules that in a cancer cell is pushing up a ligand called a PD-L1. And it's like a little hair that sticks up out of the membrane, and there's hundreds of them all over the cancer cell like this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when your T cell, and they're on normal cells also. So when your T cell comes down, and it's very active, it's very violent, it will kill. If it's got a signal to kill, it will kill. So it comes down, and it has what's called a PD-1 on the end of it. And this is the PD-L1 of the cancer cell. If the PD-1 makes contact with the PD-L1, your immune system runs away. It won't kill the cancer cell. That's how the cancer cell protects itself. That's a defense mechanism.
Huh. Okay.
So Keytruda, all these immunotherapies, they make a molecule that sticks to the end of the tyrosine of PD-L1. So you've got this inhibiting molecule stuck there. So now when the T cell comes down with its PD-1, it can't get past this. It can't make contact.
Mm-hmm.
It comes down onto the cancer cell and kills the cancer cell in 4 seconds.
Okay.
It is the most remarkable thing you would ever witness. So astaxanthin was the very first natural molecule that sticks to the end of the PD-L1 and acts as a natural inhibitor. So now the T cells come down. So there's 2 methods of kill that Vilasta does. The first one is it changes the pH from an acidic to an alkaline environment intracellular inside the cell. The second one is it's a PD-L1 inhibitor, and it acts like immunotherapy. Now, the reason that they are doing immunotherapy in the laboratory, whenever we make a synthetic organic molecule, we make both a left-handed and a right-handed molecule. Same number of thumbs, same number of fingers, same little attachments, but they're mirror images of each other. Only the left-handed molecule works. Nature only produces left-handed molecules. That's why natural supplements are so important.
Mm-hmm.
The right-hand molecule, our bodies can't handle that, and it creates side effects. And we learned this from thalidomide. Years ago in the 50s and 60s, when we got the deformed babies, women were taking thalidomide for morning sickness. Well, we made it in a laboratory, and that's before we understood chirality. And the left-hand molecule would stop morning sickness, but the right-hand molecule terminated the growth of their arms or their hands. It wasn't something that we could use. So when they make a synthetic immunotherapy drug, always keep in mind they're making both. You are going to get sick. There is a side effect. There can be liver damage because it can't assimilate this right-handed molecule very well. The advantage of having a natural supplement is it's only left-handed, and Vilasta has no side effects. Does the exact same thing.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because I was just in an interview a couple of weeks ago and they were talking about the side effects of immunotherapy and how it's miraculous on one hand, but on the other, you could have some serious damage from it.
Correct.
You know, I think what most people don't realize in this day and age is that everything that's synthetic starts in something natural.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think with the struggle with natural versus synthetic potentially that a lot of people have is that sometimes the natural can take longer to feel the effects of. And you have to be diligent and consistent. Where you are with synthetic, but that's because you're monitored and almost kind of drug into a system, especially when it comes to cancer. Where, I mean, if you're once you're diagnosed, everything happens so fast that you really don't even have a say in care. You're just kind of going along with it. They're like, this is where you're going to show up. This is what we're going to do. Like, and there's no choice in the matter. Where when you go the natural route, it's truly an intentional decision to be diligent and to trust your body and to trust the maker or the one who, you know, wraps it up in a package for us of this
Sure.
herb or this plant compound or whatever it is, this enzyme, right? And so this is just really cool.
Yeah. The problem with natural supplements is the reason it takes so long is because the concentration is so low, so low.
Hmm. Yeah.
So you have to be in a position where you have very tight control over the concentration of the active ingredient in the supplement. And in natural products, it can depend on the soil that it's grown in. It can depend on how that product was even manufactured. And that can become a real problem in
Right.
the quality of the natural supplement. So it's a very, very difficult um, problem, to get around.
Yeah.
So that was always the struggle I had as a biochemist, because it was hard for me to follow when somebody would say, well, take curcumin or turmeric, or they're great antioxidants, but how they're processed, how it's grown, what the concentration is, because that's very important in chemistry, is understanding the concentration and what's the concentration driving force to get it into the cell.
Hmm.
Well, what we found with the astaxanthin was that when we began to purify it out of the algae cells, it wasn't as effective. And I'd always thought the more concentrated that it was, the more we could control it, the more effective it would be. Well, it come to find out through probably almost a year of research that the algae produces the astaxanthin in what's called the glucosidic form. It
Mm.
actually has a lipid and a glucose chemically attached to the astaxanthin. I didn't know that at the time. But when we would extract it, we used a process called CO2 supercritical extraction, very high
Mm.
pressure process, and it would crack the glucose off of the astaxanthin, so you end up with the pure astaxanthin.
Hmm.
And I thought, wow, that's really better. It's much more pure. It's in a nice form. The problem is that your small bowel would not absorb it in its stable form like that. It likes it to be in the glucosidic form. So we found that if I could attach the glucose back onto the astaxanthin, then it was 8 times more absorbable.
Okay. That's
So,
huge.
yeah, that was huge. That was really what settled it. A lot of the research you see with an NIH, and there's thousands of research papers now on this through the National Institute of Health. You look at the milligrams per kilogram of body weight of the animal they're testing on, and it's thousands of milligrams if it was translated directly to a human ingestion.
Hmm.
But if you use the glucosidic form of astaxanthin, it's down in the 50 to 100 milligram range.
Oh, that's cost effective too,
It is
when it's that
absolutely,
low.
absolutely. And so we then knew that we had a product that was extremely commercially viable, having the same effects of Keytruda. Keytruda, which is an immunotherapy, has a cost of somewhere between $20,000 and $36,000 a month, depending on your dose.
Yep.
We get the same effect at $200 to $300 a month. And
Life changing.
that is an economic hurdle. And now we have a foundation, and we started this. It's called the Inflammatory Disease Research Foundation. And we take donations to that for people who are really having a difficult time with meeting their chemo, their medical bills. We do consulting, and we try to help them out as best we can. And it's a way of, and we're hooked up with some cancer societies. So if somebody is really in trouble, we don't want economics to be the reason why someone dies.
Yeah.
To me, that is one of the saddest situations we have with our current healthcare.
Agreed.
And that's got to be mitigated. And we now have a product that can keep you, if you keep your HSCRP less than 3 milligrams per liter, you don't have to do anything else.
Yeah.
Just keep it below 3 milligrams per liter, and you won't get these diseases. People really struggle. They say, well, what about diet and alcohol consumption? And I said, well, the 67% of all inflammatory diseases, believe it or not, are caused by high sugar fruits. Fructose is a poison.
Yeah.
I have not eaten any significant amount of fruit for probably 20 years. I've eliminated it from my diet. And I don't see people getting scurvy, but fruits are nature's candy. Glucose, sugar, is used by every cell in your body. Fructose is not used by a single cell in your body.
No.
It's the primary precursor to triglycerides, to LDL cholesterol.
Yep.
Fructose and alcohol are processed the same way in the liver.
Yep.
So when people have high cholesterol and high triglycerides, the first thing I tell them is stop eating the fruit. Second is stop eating sugar.
Yeah.
And those are the two things that I think Bobby Kennedy's onto it. I think he's got it figured out too. So if we could eliminate those two things out of our diet, it stops the generation of these free radicals.
I'm going to take a quick second to pause the interview because after Sam and I were done recording, we talked for like another half hour or so. It was so much fun to talk with him. In that time, I told him exactly what I do and how I do it. And what he said is he and I basically have this symbiotic relationship where I help people regain their health through diet and reduce environmental toxins, which means I reduce the amount of toxins coming into the body and he increases the amount of toxins going out. So by reducing it, more of the toxins that have built up in our body that we're just exposed to in every day. It's in the air, in the water, it's on the food that we eat, it's in the cars that we drive, it's in the mattress we sleep on, it's on the fabrics that we wear. That if we're, reducing the amount of toxins coming in, he's able to increase the amount of toxins going out and health just flourishes. And I loved how he put that. And so no matter what set of symptoms you're dealing with, eating in a way that is simple to do so that you stick with it, is nourishing and gives the body what it needs to function optimally and then heal is essential. And then you pair that with targeted supplemental support and it can absolutely revolutionize your health. My ultimate goal is to make the process of changing what you eat as easy as possible. I do this by doing the heavy lifting for you with meal plan programs and my coaching program. No more guessing, no more trying to figure it out on your own, no more going on social media, reading blogs and being told conflicting information and feeling like nothing you do is going to be right, so why even bother? And no more spending 3 hours making a meal only for it to be flavorless and uninspiring. If you need to follow a therapeutic diet for your diagnosis, I have meal plans for those as well. No more guessing what to eat off of a handout with a list of don'ts. No more over-restricting and being hungry or food becoming a thing necessary to survive but not enjoyable at all. Eating for your health should be enjoyable. No matter what set of restrictions are necessary for healing, it should taste good and you definitely shouldn't be hungry all day. You can learn more about my meal plan and coaching programs by checking out the links in the show notes. And now let's get back to learning from Samuel.
Now, if we can stop the generation of the free radicals, and now with Velasta, we can eliminate them that is accumulating in our body, all of a sudden our probability of getting an inflammatory disease goes down dramatically by orders of magnitude.
I have a question.
Yep.
For those who are struggling with autoimmune disease or maybe toxin overload, such as mold toxicity or due to like mold exposure or, something like that, do you know through your research, could you say that this could help or help support the body's process in reducing inflammation, which we know is a root cause of, it's the domino, right? Of that. So we remove sugar, which is huge, and we remove sugary fruit, alcohol, because those are all, high fructose corn syrup, fructose corn syrup, agave. Agave has more fructose than high fructose corn syrup, and we stick to, and then we have the ability to actually reduce the free radicals, the toxins, and all of that. Could that help mitigate the symptoms?
Yeah, we saw this with COVID. Believe it or not, something positive came out of COVID.
I think there's a
But
lot
people,
that of positive that came out of it, along with a lot of detriment and
yeah,
harm.
yeah.
But yeah, okay, go ahead.
So what happened in COVID? You don't die from viruses. You die from the inflammation caused by the viruses.
Correct. Yeah.
So when people got COVID, if they were on Vilasta, they didn't die because the inflammatory response, and one of the things that the body does to respond to inflammation is it pumps fluid in, trying to dilute the problem away. So your lungs fill up with fluid because of the inflammation in your lungs, and you drown and you suffocate and you die. Well, if you stop the inflammation, none of that happens. You interrupt interleukin 6, all your cytokine storm stops. So whether it's mold, whether it's yeast, whether it's heavy metals, doesn't matter because they themselves don't cause the disease. They cause an immune response in our body that then causes the inflammation and the disease. So if we can think of it this way, you have a big sturdy oak tree, and you can look at the root structure of this oak tree, and you have this trunk, and the trunk goes up and you got these big limbs hanging off. Each limb, the tip of each one of those branches is a disease. The doctors stand on the ground and they treat the disease, the symptoms of the disease. Well, the root structure is your diet, your exposure to heavy metals, your exposure to fungus, parasites, viruses, bacteria. Everything in nature is in the root structure. Well, each one of those will generate ROS, reactive oxygen species. Those 4 reactive oxygen species are in the trunk of the tree. So the trunk is the ROS. The tree is the presented disease from the ROS. So what our medical industry is doing is only treating the symptoms. That's why they say cancer can't be cured. Well, it can be cured. What Vilasta does is it cuts the tree off at the trunk. So the ROS cannot get to the disease. You can't, if you eliminate the ROS, you eliminate the progression into a disease state. So that's how it works. So I'm not too concerned if you keep your HSCRP under 3. I don't care what you do. You can drink alcohol, eat all the fruit you want, eat the sugar, but keep your HSCRP less than 3. It doesn't make any difference because that's what's killing people. Now, in engineering, there's an equation: in minus out equals accumulation. So if you can't get control over the free radicals coming into your system, maybe you got to change your diet. Maybe you have to do something a little different. Smoking cigarettes is a good example. I can't give you enough Vilasta to take out all the free radicals generated if you're going to smoke cigarettes. Just don't even, I don't even want to sell the product to you. So we have 2 things. On the left side of the equation, we have in minus out. And on the right side of the equation equals accumulation. The accumulation term is what causes disease. The more of these free radicals I have, the more likely it is I'm going to get a disease. Mm-hmm. So on the left side of the equation, I have 2 things that I can manage. So if we can, in fact, stop the generation of those free radicals, and we can do that with diet, we can do it with reduce your cortisol levels, your physiological stress. You hear of so many caregivers after they've taken care of somebody who was sick, getting cancer and dying shortly thereafter.
Right.
That's the physiological stress, the epinephrine, norepinephrine, the cortisol. It all has to be processed in the liver. Well, the liver generates these free radicals when it tries to process those steroids, and that's what causes the disease. It causes inflammation of those, or the production of those 4 free radicals that eventually lead to activation of interleukin 6 and autoimmune response. Now, So what we focus on is let's reduce the in term, the rate at which we generate these free radicals. And with the Velasta, we can increase the out term, the rate at which we can get rid of them. And that thereby decreases the accumulation of those to a more normal, acceptable inflammatory disease level or an inflammatory level. We have to have some inflammation for communication in the cells. It's when it gets overwhelming that we end up with the presentation of these diseases.
Yeah. So just to interrupt, a lot of people struggle with, especially when they're like in the thick of chronic illness and they're almost debilitated. Like they think that perfection is the only way to health. And to hear you say, hey, some inflammation's okay, right? Like when people, I remember when the alkaline diet came out and people were like freaking out about eating acidic foods. And I'm like, hey, we have to have both, right? Like you have to, there's a balance that has to be attained. And, what I think really stands out is that the Velastra allows you for living life without having to worry so much. Having that extra support to keep inflammation at a healthy range and being able to feel like, oh, I can enjoy this food, or, if I'm going to be exposed to toxins because I'm flying or whatever. Because I know people that like freak out, like I'm going to Europe and I'm so worried about mold, and like the stress of it actually makes them sick when they come home because they're worried about it the whole time. And so having something that's affordable, that has a patent, so there's more control over the consistency of the dose, really does allow for I think it could, when people understand it the way that you've explained it, which I can understand why you teach the entry level bioengineers, because you explain it so in such an understandable form, which I just really appreciate. Having that wiggle room to be able to say, hey, if we can do 80-20 on your diet where you're eating, good food, organic when you can afford it, all these things, and we reduce our toxic load. We try to have as clean of ingredients as possible. But like, we can't control what's in our air. We only have so much control over what's in our water. And just to kind of, for me, what I'm learning from you is that we can have something to help mitigate so that we don't have to worry about every little thing. Because what I found is over the years, like people strive for perfection so much and they strive for it all at once. And it's like, no, this kind of gives you the wiggle room to kind of build and to reform slowly.
And it relieves that stress level, the worry level, that component of it. There's a couple things that we found out when we got into this was that they've got Parkinson's wrong. They have, this whole idea of people getting inflammatory breast cancer and they immediately want to put you on some form of chemical castration, whether it's estrogen reduction or testosterone reduction.
Mm-hmm.
Well, estrogen does not cause cancer.
Nope.
And the reason that they do this is what causes cancer is dihydroxyestradiol. It's a known carcinogen. Now, how is dihydroxyestrogen, really, or estradiol, produced? Well, it's a reaction between estrogen plus the hydroxyl free radical, which is one of these reactive oxygen species, yields dihydroxyestradiol. Now, young girls don't get cancer. They don't get breast cancer. They don't get ovarian cancers. But their hydroxyl free radical concentration as measured by their HSCRP is very low. Mm-hmm. So they don't have this reaction happening. Well, as women get older, the stress level, the hydroxyl free radical concentration, because we're no longer producing cellular antioxidants like glutathione and catalase, it begins to increase. It begins to react with the estrogen. And now these women in their 40s and 50s, are now getting breast cancer, ovarian cancers. Men
autoimmune diseases, IBS.
The autoimmune diseases.
Yeah.
And so the same thing with testosterone. Testosterone will react with the hydroxyl free radical and form dihydroxytestosterone. It's why men lose their hair. It's why they get prostate cancer. Dihydroxytestosterone is also a known carcinogen. Mm-hmm. Well, what current medicine is focused on is on the testosterone and the estrogen part of that chemical reaction. They're not looking at your stress level, your state of mind. What is it that's creating this increase in hydroxyl free radicals? Now, they could give you steroids, but there's a tremendous side effect problem. Steroids is another way of mitigating these reactive oxygen species, but the side effects are terrible.
Yeah.
So what we focus on, instead of like in Parkinson's, dopamine, they thought for the longest time the brain was no longer producing dopamine, and therefore these people were getting Parkinson's. That's not true. In the substantia nigra part of the brain, we find that the Parkinson's people are still producing large amounts of dopamine, but they have this other product called hydroxydopamine in their brain. That concentration is increasing as they get older. Well, hydroxydopamine is what we give to animals to give them Parkinson's so that we can test Parkinson's medications on. So we have dopamine plus the hydroxyl free radical yields hydroxydopamine.
Look at that.
Yeah, now, what does the medical industry do? They say, you need more dopamine.
Oh, man.
So we give you more levodopa and carbidopa, and for a short period of time, it helps until the hydroxyl free radical catches up to it. And now you become resistant and you die. So what we focused on was don't mess with the dopamine, just decrease the hydroxyl free radical.
Right.
And sure enough, Parkinson's tremors go away. We have a lady in Hershey, Pennsylvania, had severe arthritis, and we gave it to her. Her arthritis went away in about 7 days. So she called us, my wife and I, on the phone as we're driving back from Washington. And she says, I just want to thank you for this product. And I said, okay. I said, she said, I have no more arthritic pain. But she said, that's not the real reason I'm calling you. And I went, okay. She said, something you didn't know is that I have severe Parkinson's. I couldn't hold food on a fork. My tremors were so bad. And she said, all of my tremors have stopped. I no longer shake from Parkinson's. She said, I went into Hershey and my doctor was shocked that I no longer appeared to have Parkinson's. She says, do you have an explanation for that? He was wanting to know. And I said, I think I do. I think that you're now producing enough dopamine, and when we reduce the hydroxyl concentration in your body, your dopamine level increased naturally, and your tremors went away. And that's exactly what happened. So it completely disrupts the current medical biochemistry of what medicine is. And these doctors can't flip over because that's the way they've been trained.
Right.
They can't make the adjustment.
Well, and I think we're seeing that a lot with the changes that are coming down from HHS currently, Bobby Kennedy. The medical industry complex is freaking out. Oh, it's baseless. Oh, it's this. Oh, it's that. No, the science is there.
It is. The science is absolutely there.
And to ignore it, I mean, if we were still giving pregnant women the medication,
thalidomide. Yeah.
Thalidomide, like, it's okay to change. It's okay to, medicine shouldn't be 17 years behind the science. I love integrative medicine, holistic medicine, whatever you want to call it, because they are open to, I would say that some doctors stay up on this research so much that they're only, 2 years behind, maybe? And that's just because it took so many years for the research to be published and to be found valid, right? And there's a lot less risk with plant compounds for the most part in general.
That's because they're left-handed.
Right.
Natural foods are left-handed. Don't make me a food in a laboratory. I know how that works. I struggled with that for 40 years. I know the organic chemistry side.
Yeah. And so it's like you can't, in medicine is a practice, and you have to treat it as such. And you have to be willing to ask questions. Like, my favorite doctors are, I love MDs who move into the functional world. They ask questions and they're willing to go deeper. And I think that that's just the most beautiful thing. And that's really what you decided to do. And you were so cautious. Cautious, but God forced your hand. And the lives that you were changing. I actually have my grandfather died from Parkinson's. He lived, they kept telling us for like 20 years he was going to die in the next 6 months, and he just kept chugging along. But now I have an uncle who is in the beginning stages of Parkinson's disease. And I'm like, maybe I need to publish this episode like next week just so I can send it to them and they can hear about it. And the fact that cost is so low, it can really, that's life changing.
Oh, it has changed so many lives. I could send you pictures of a lady, 2 to 4 months, had a huge tumor, and they wouldn't do surgery because the main nerve from her back to her arm
Mm,
was infiltrated into the tumor, and they would paralyze her, removing the
right.
tumor. So they sent her home with hospice, told her she had 2 to 4 months. So we put her on this, and she said, how was that? It was about the size of not a basketball, but probably as big as a pineapple
Whew,
underneath
ouch.
her arm.
Hmm.
And she said, how is this going to go away? I said, well, I said, your skin is going to open up and your white blood cells and your immune system is going to push it out, just like pushing out a baby. She said, are you serious? I said, yep. I said, I've seen it before. Well, I can show you pictures as to what happened. She took a series of pictures. Her skin opened up and the entire tumor fell out. No surgery, and she didn't lose function of her arm.
The body's miraculous when it
Oh,
has what it needs to heal. It is so incredible, and I mean, as a health coach, my favorite thing is getting people at the beginning stages of disease and how simple it is to reverse. It just takes a
correct.
few tweaks. But you have these examples of the severe disease states, giving the body what it needs. It's able to do its job. And I think that is just, I love the human body so much. I'm totally nerding out right now. I'm also so honored to be talking to you and learning from the person who has done this research for so long. Like, I'm kind of like a little starstruck right now. So
Well, don't
thank
be. You are absolutely right. God put me into a pinch. I call it a pinch point. I couldn't go through the wall anymore. I was either going to go under the wall or I was going to have to go over it.
Yeah.
I was I was put in a position of this is going to change. I'm either going to put a bullet in my head so I don't have to be taken care of by my family, or God gave me all the tools to put in this toolbox.
Yeah.
I spent 40 years working in high technology, developing a lot of things. And I used every single chemistry, physics, calculus, thermodynamics, kinetics, engineering. I used every single component that I was ever trained in. And I thought, if anybody can figure this out, I can figure this out. I have all the tools in the toolbox. And it worked. It worked. But the motivation, like I said, was sort of narcissistic.
I wouldn't even say I would say self-serving. I wouldn't say
Self-serving.
narcissistic,
There we go.
but
It was to
definitely,
save my own life.
yeah.
That was the motivation.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I really don't. I think what keeps it from staying self-serving is the fact that you kept researching. You wanted to understand why, and then you were pushed ever so gently to go public with it. And it's not gently. I mean, how absolutely terrifying. But you were put in a place where it was no longer allowed to be a secret anymore. And
And it didn't matter. It didn't matter about me.
yeah,
Now Pandora's out of the box.
yeah,
Whether I'm
and
here or not doesn't matter. But we had to cross that line.
and I'm so grateful that you did because as I said, I'm seeing it mainstream in leaders in my industry shouting it from the rooftops, and I'm so honored to be another one joining them with you to just give this to people. So thank you for being so self-serving. and
Well,
and then
Marion, we're just messengers.
it's true, we are.
There's
Yeah.
nothing new under the sun. We just have to discover it.
Yep.
And
Exactly.
there's so many stories to tell. And there's a bunch of testimonials on the website. If anybody's interested, then go to velasta.net. All the NIH papers there in support of this. The NIH launched a full investigation, I think to prove me wrong after my presentation in Washington. They ended up proving me right. All the research shows that this is absolutely scientifically correct in understanding why we get these inflammatory diseases. You still sort of have to wake up and pinch yourself when you think about this is actually having an impact, a worldwide impact. We didn't do any sales, we didn't or any marketing whatsoever. We just gave it to people. Their cancers went away. They told 100 people. Those 100 people told 100 people. It went completely around the world. We have offices now in Dubai, in Poland, in Denmark, in England, in the Sudan, in Egypt, Singapore, Malaysia, Australia.
In just what, 5 years?
Yeah, just by social media. This is something when I grew up, we were still putting advertisements on billboards.
Yeah.
This social media thing is instantaneous. It
Yeah.
goes around the world at the speed of light. It's a game changer. And when somebody is truly hopeless and they find that their cancer has been eradicated, it changes them forever.
Yeah.
And I'm just grateful that I was given my second life.
Yeah, me too. I'm
And there's
so
no more
incredibly
fear in
grateful.
my life. I don't fear anything anymore. What is there I don't fear losing my children. I don't fear being beheaded. I don't fear being shot. I don't have any fear anymore in my life. It was as if I died in 2003 to 2006. That was the lowest point of my life. And I died. My whole life was changed. And now it's like all the guardrails came off. Like everything is sort of exposed. Everything is available. It's like I don't fear where my next meal's coming from. I don't fear running out of gas. I don't fear my car breaking down. I don't fear anything anymore. So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Now I have a very uh, um, a very nice wife companion who does put guardrails on me once in a while. And thank God every day for her, because I would probably go take a risk and do something stupid.
That's what we're here for, right?
It
All
is.
right. So I will put the link in the show notes so that everybody can click on it and do the research and purchase if that's what they want to do.
Please pursue this. Everybody should run their HSCRP.
Yes. And, if your doctor's not willing to do it, cash pay is not that expensive and you can have it run yourself. That's something that I want to talk about. There are some amazing labs out there. My favorite is Vibrant Labs. I mean, you can get it at LabQuest and Request, all of that.
You can do it on our website too.
Perfect. So
Yeah.
that's fantastic. So, there's always an option. And with the way premiums are going, I think a lot of people are going to be going cash pay. And so having an affordable option is fantastic. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Again, just thank you for everything. I'm so honored to have this whole conversation with you and
No, I'm honored
learn
to be
from
on it
you.
with you and give these people it.
Hope.
Yeah, it's not over till it's over. You
Yeah.
know, I don't think people knew where to turn. They ran out of options.
Yeah, and what I strive to do is let people know what options are available out there. And
Thank God, Marianne, you're
and
out
there
there.
there are so many amazing, incredible options out there. And what I strive to do is first let people know what's available. And second, give them a place to start researching because when you understand why to do something, you're more likely to stick with it and to do it. And same with diet. Like, okay, once I know what to do, how do I make it work? Well, that's what I do, right?
Mhm.
I have meal plans and wrapped in a bow to show you what it's like to eat an inflammatory nutrient rich diet. You have astaxanthin in a
Very good.
bio, I wrote it down, in a bioavailable form, and in an affordable form where the body can actually do something with it. And it's just the easier we can make it for people to get and stay healthy, we change the world. And medicine, allopathic medicine goes back to its place, which it shines
Yeah.
in acute care. Where it doesn't shine is in chronic illness. That's where it fails. And to be able to discover what God has put on this earth for us and then to make it available for the masses is really such a blessing, whether it stems from self-serving or not. I mean, all of us have to get well before we can help others, right?
That's right.
You have to put your mask on before you put your mask on your kid on the
That's
airplane,
exactly
right?
right.
So while it might seem self-serving, it only stays self-serving if you keep it a secret and you stop searching. It's just everything starts with help, with healing ourselves, and then we're able to share it with others. The caution you had has allowed for you to be able to create a consistent, bioavailable package for this antioxidant, for this compound, this natural healing that the earth provides us. It's above it, you got it patented, like mind blowing.
It's Marion, it blew my mind because the patent office is not real receptive to patenting natural supplements.
Nope.
But we provided them a huge amount of information. And the title of the patent, which has some regulatory agencies on edge right now, but the title of the patent is a method for the process of using astaxanthin for the treatment of inflammatory disease, particularly for the treatment of cancer. As you're aware, FDA requires a disclaimer that says this product cannot be used to treat, diagnose, or cure any disease.
Correct.
The patent office requires me to also put on there that this product can be used to treat inflammatory disease. So I have two regulating agencies in conflict with each other, and we're in compliance with both. Let the people decide, what they want to believe. But one protects the pharmaceutical and medical industry. The other one tells you as an individual, you have hope and this thing works. And that's the game changer.
Well, thank you for everything that you have done and you are continuing to do. What a blessing you are to the world. And this has been a wonderful conversation. I do think I'm going to publish this episode right away. So just because this is so powerful and going into the new year, what better time?
Oh, what better time for a New Year's, New Year's resolution?
Just to help you with whatever resolution you come up with. If this is the year to really put your health as the first focus, talk about something to help. So thank you again, Samuel. I really appreciate you.
God bless you, Marion. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. If you found this episode helpful, would you do me a favor and help others find it by leaving a review, sharing a screenshot on social media, or sharing the link with a friend? By you sharing what you've learned, others are able to find this podcast and join our community. Be sure to check out my website, www.roadtolivingwhole.com, for over 160 delicious recipes, a variety of meal plans, and a blog packed full of even more healthy living tips. If you'd like to learn more about how to work with me as your coach, you can schedule a free consult through www.roadtolivingwhole.com/health-coaching/. Until next time, friend. Bye.